Hello, this is Justin Miller and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'll be reviewing The Watchers. Written and directed by Ishana Shyamalan based on the novel by A.M. Shine. Produced by Shyamalan's father, M. Night Shyamalan, through his Blinding Edge Pictures production company. The film stars Dakota Fanning, Georgina Campbell, Olwen Fouéré, and Oliver Finnegan. Eli Aronson served as the director of photography, Job Terberg served as editor, and production design was done by Ferdia Murphy. The film was distributed by Warner Bros. Pictures, who paid $30 million to acquire the film. The film was released on June 7, 2024, and up to this point it has made $11 million worldwide. And so far the film has received mixed to negative critical reception. I want to preface this review by stating how much of a fan I am of M. Night Shyamalan. I can't wait to watch his new film Trap, which promises to continue the summer of Shyamalan in a very strong way. The fact that a father and daughter are having two films released in such a short time span is a notable achievement, and one that I think is very cool and interesting, no matter what the results are. With that being said, let's discuss my thoughts on the film. Let's review The Watchers. I have not read the book that this film is based on, though it seems obvious from the film that there is very rich and deep lore, character development, and all sorts of thematic elements underneath that are in the story that Ishana Shyamalan is very strongly trying to bring out within the storytelling itself. Now, this causes one of the major problems that I have with the film: overuse of exposition in an unnatural way, which sort of bogs down some of the dialogue sequences in the film. So many moments grind to a halt as we need to get more exposition dumps and more of the lore explained. I believe that the mystery kind of gets killed a little bit, and a lot of the suspense as well, which is something that this film is really needing to rely on in order to keep audiences engaged. The film could have really benefited to use those moments to build those secondary characters, to continue to build more emotional depth. While I think we get some very interesting character work done with Mina, and I think Dakota Fanning gives a really good performance, the rest of the characters feel very underdeveloped, which I think hurts the narrative overall. This is then seen in the ending not being as satisfying as it could have been. We obviously get the false ending, which is a trick that I really hate because it's so obvious in every single film that it's done. Why are we still following the characters? Obviously, we haven't gotten a true conclusion. And it just kept dragging and dragging and dragging, waiting for the big twist and the big other shoe to fall. So I just found that this reliance on lore building and sort of building the mystery, but not really. It was this weird thing where you're both trying to build a mystery, but you're also giving too much away in a way that doesn't really make sense. Like, why would these characters know as much as they know? Or also, in certain situations, why wouldn't they know more than they already know? Right? The ending in particular I find kind of egregious. The whole idea that they didn't even look underneath to see that there was a latch, to see that there was a door underneath that they could have easily gone into. I find that ridiculous. You're there for months and you don't even bother to look around, and you don't even bother to look around at this place that you've been living in. I find that ridiculous. I find it a bit cheap, and I think that in general the twists in this film, the sort of the ultimate linear narrative that it's following isn't that interesting. What I find more interesting, is the visual camera work that is being displayed by the technical crew, right? I think Ishana Shyamalan shows a lot of talent visually within this filmmaking, and I think there's some interesting storytelling being done, but it's more through the specific character of Mina and the flashbacks with her. I find all that much more interesting than I do the other characters or what's going on and what's the real reality of the Watchers, right? When we get to know their backstory, it's not very interesting. And I find the psychology of the characters would have been a lot more interesting to explore than what we ultimately get. That being said, what we do get of Mina's character I do think is very fascinating, very interesting. There has been some critics that have accused Dakota Fanning of underacting in this film, and I completely disagree. I think that it totally fits her character, the way that she's acting, the way that she's sort of detached and depressed, and I love that. I love how you can clearly see the development that she's going through, even though you can't really see that with the other characters, and it makes things like Daniel's death just not have that weight that it needs to have. And, Sierra's character, I just don't really find her that intriguing, and she's a very flat character at the end of the day. So it's disappointing, right? And the whole twist with Madeline, I did feel like that was a little bit foreshadowed, right? I think it was a little bit obvious what was going to happen with that. But I really did still enjoy lots of aspects of the film as well. It's a very big mixed bag for me, right? I like the debut from Ashana Shyamalan. I think she did a very good job in some of the early visuals, right? And to build this sort of interesting world that we're entering into. But then she kind of kills it with her reliance on exposition and all these other elements of plot that are just not that well done and not that interesting. I think there was certain aspects that she clearly wanted to explore, but she didn't go fully in, right? She didn't fully explore them to the levels that I would have liked to see, but she also did enough there to make it an intriguing film and to really give us something to watch and to care for in the Mina character. And I really do like what they did with the Mina character, this idea of that haunting trauma from a childhood clearly being represented throughout the narrative and her overcoming of that somewhat by the end of the narrative. She's not fully over it, but she's starting to be able to move on slightly and begin to live her life in a way away from this sort of haunted idea, right? This haunting idea that she's responsible for her mother's death, she's not a good person, and she can never be a good person because of what happened. I find that really interesting, and it truly gives some weight to everything that's going on and her desire to escape, to her desire to live. I find it really interesting, and I find it makes it interesting when she interacts with the other characters. Unfortunately, they're more flat characters than what I would have liked, but it gives her real depth, and I think that is a really strong boon for the film, and I think that's a really strong sign for Shyamalan's career, that she has those storytelling chops. If she could have just relied on that sort of skills more, I think the rest of the characters could have been much more fully developed and much more interesting. As for the sort of horror aspects of the film, I don't think those were necessarily super well done. There was like one very cheap jump scare at the beginning that got me, I'll admit to that. I think there was a bird sequence at the very beginning of the film. I did find Mina's interaction with the bird, right, to be very funny. I thought that was pretty cool. Darwin. I thought that was a cool little moment and cool moments throughout the film, and her constant bringing him with her and everything. I thought that was a really cool little element of the film. But I ultimately didn't really find the Watchers that scary. I mean, there was some cool little moments that they kind of gave away in the trailer. Like, the applause sequence was really unsettling, but they kind of gave it away in the trailer, so it didn't really have as much weight as I wish it could have. But if I had gone in blind, I think that would have been a very effective scene. I think Ashana Shyamalan clearly shows some talent in this regard, but I think that it ultimately wasn't that scary of a movie. It felt more like a chill horror movie, but I actually kind of liked that whole ambience, right? It sort of reminded me of like a Silent Hill or like a Black Coat's Daughter or something like that. Not necessarily as unsettling and scary as those things can be, but sort of the more chill moments in those, but stretched out throughout the whole narrative. So there's still that sort of unsettling aspect, but not fully going in and committing like those films do. Instead, living in that uncomfortableness. It sort of also reminds me of the film The Mothman Prophecies, which I also kind of like. That sort of chill ambience that it's kind of unsettling and it can kind of spook you a little bit, but it's not so overwhelmingly scary. It doesn't necessarily go that next level. It's very much a PG-13 thriller horror film, which I enjoy quite a bit. So overall, I would say that there's some serious flaws within the storytelling, though there's also some very strong bright spots. I think Ashana Shyamalan has a very bright career ahead of her. I'm very much looking forward to the next films that she does as she continues to try and branch off away from her father and finding her own voice. I think that the film ultimately is still pretty enjoyable, as like I said, it's a strong, strong PG-13 little horror film. Not necessarily super scary, but I just kind of like the chill vibe that it emanates. And I think there's some very strong character moments that help ground the film. So if you're a fan of Shyamalan, I definitely recommend to go to watch it. If you liked the trailer, I recommend you go watch it. It's an interesting film if it doesn't fully satisfy its sort of potential and its premise. It seems to be doing okay box office-wise. It might not be able to fully make its money back, which is kind of disappointing. Hopefully it continues to do well. So for that reason alone, I definitely recommend you go and watch it because we need more films from Ashana Shyamalan. I believe fully that she's going to be a very intriguing director to watch in the future. With that being said, let me know your thoughts on the film in the comment section below. And also, is anyone looking forward to watching the film Trap? Thank you so much for watching, and see you next week.